Hi, thanks very much for watching my video. So this is a video for AQA GCSE Religious Studies, Spec A, and it's just a little explainer. I've been asked by quite a few people to make this video. It just takes you through each of the skills that you need for each type of question. In terms of where I'm pitching this video is very much for you if you're aiming for a top grade. So if you're aiming for a grade 8 or 9, also it might give you some tips to improve even if you're not perhaps aiming that high. But the level of detail that I'm including in my model answers is aimed at students who are going for the top grades. So I hope you find it useful. Let's get into it. So you probably know this, but here is just a little reminder of the 5 types of question that make up each section of the GCSE exam. So each question really comes in 5 parts, but each part is worth a different number of marks. So we have the 1-mark questions. These are just a simple multiple choice. You just pick an option. 2-mark questions, you give 2 pieces of information. 4-mark questions are always asking you to explain 2 things, 2 ideas, 2 beliefs, 2 reasons sometimes. There's a few different things that they can look like. The 5-mark question is very similar to the 4-mark question, but this time it's asking for, again, explain 2 ideas, but the 5th mark is for a clear reference to scripture, sacred writings, or another source of religious belief and teaching. And I'll talk a little bit later on about what that can look like. And then everybody's favourite, the 12-mark questions. So this is a lot of the marks. This is half your marks. Exploring and evaluating both sides of an argument, considering religious views and perspectives, reaching your own conclusion. This is where it's hard to get it really, really good, but hopefully I'm going to help you, and with some practice, you'll be able to make some really great improvements. So very quickly, the examples that I've got in this PowerPoint are largely from Islam. If you're not doing Islam, hopefully you'll still find the structure helpful, and you can apply it to whichever religions you are studying. So 1-mark question, this is what it might look like on Islam practices. Which of these is not one of the 5 pillars? You choose the one that it's not. So in this case, the answer is B, jihad's not one of the 5 pillars. This should take an absolute maximum of 1 minute. Now you might be thinking, well, I can do it a lot quicker than that. And you're probably right, but the only thing I would say to that is just make sure you read the question really, really, really carefully, because if you don't clock that word not in the question, you might just go far too fast. You might just select the first of the 5 pillars you see, which would be Salah, and you'd end up getting it wrong. It's worth just taking a few seconds to read the question a couple of times, make sure that you know what it's asking. Okay, 1-mark question done. 2-mark question. Again, you might be thinking, well, this is really simple, I don't need help with this. But something that I see a lot is people writing too much for these. So it's only worth 2 marks, and your command word, so that's the word at the start of the question, is give. So give literally just means write down. It doesn't mean explain, it doesn't mean describe in detail. Don't need to do that. So it can just be 2 short bullet points, 2 super short sentences. Now, even with thinking time, maximum 2 minutes I would spend on this. If you're spending more, then you're doing too much. So 2 examples of things Muslims do as part of Salah. If you chose the 2 examples I put here, so wudu, ritual ablution, and prostration, bowing low, I think they would give you the marks even if you just put wudu and prostration, because you are giving 2 things. If you want to be super safe, you could do what I've done there and just add a couple more words to explain, but you would absolutely not need any more than that. Okay, get these shorter questions out the way, get them right, do what you need to do to get the marks, and move on. So let's do that now. All right, so 4-mark questions. These can look quite different depending on which paper we're in. So in beliefs and practices, it will be something like the question that you can see here. Explain 2 reasons why fasting at Ramadan is important for Muslims. Sometimes it's an influences question. So it could be something like, explain 2 ways that a belief in something influences Christians or influences Muslims. That's going to take a little bit of thought. So what that's asking, if it's influences, is if a Christian or a Muslim believes X, what does that mean for their life? But let's go back to this one. Let's look at this one for a second. 2 reasons why fasting at Ramadan is important for Muslims. I would recommend that you set this out as 2 short paragraphs. The reason why I would do it as 2 paragraphs is because then the marker can see exactly where one point ends and the next begins. Don't make life hard for your marker. They want to give you the marks and just move on. So make it easy for them to do that for you. So I've got my little sentence starters there. 1 reason is, and then I give my reason. This shows that fasting is important. That's useful to put in because the question is about the importance of fasting at Ramadan. So it's good to do that. I would spend no more than 5 minutes on this. And if you can get it done in a little bit less, that's even better because you want to be saving a good amount of time to do your 12 marker at the end. So on the next slide, I've done a model answer for this one. This is, I think, the maximum amount of detail that you would need. So let's take a look. When we're looking at the model answers in the video, if you want to take a minute to read it properly, just feel free to pause and then restart when you're ready. Okay? So as you can see, I've set this out as my 2 paragraphs. It probably looks like more writing than it is, but it's really just a few sentences. So I've given my reason, and then I've shown that I understand why it's important. And then my second reason, I've made sure it's different. What I do sometimes see with these is when people are a little bit shaky on their knowledge and they're trying to style it out, they tend to say the same thing again, but just in different words. Examiners are very savvy. They're RE teachers mostly. They will spot that and they won't credit you twice for saying the same thing twice. So don't do it. Okay, so as you can see, 2 short paragraphs, 2 reasons, both explained. That would get 4 out of 4, but that's the most you would need to write. You wouldn't need to write more than that. Okay, still on the 4-mark question, I want to talk about this because this can come up in the themes paper. Sometimes people get thrown by the wording of these questions. So in the themes paper, you can quite often get something like this. So this example is from theme A. Explain 2 contrasting religious beliefs in contemporary British society about contraception. In your answer, you should refer to the main religious tradition of Great Britain and 1 other religious tradition. So what they're looking for here, they're not just looking for your 2 points explained, they're looking to see that you know what the main religious tradition of Great Britain is, it's Christianity, and they want to see that you can contrast that with another religious tradition. You've got to be careful here because you've got to make sure that you say which religions you're talking about. If you don't do that, you might still get partial credit, but you're probably not going to get full marks because it's just not going to be clear enough. So structure should be exactly the same, 2 short paragraphs, make sure it's 2 religions, 1 of which must be Christianity. And again, I wouldn't spend more than 5 minutes on this. So my answer is here. 1 belief held by many Roman Catholics, and that's fine because that's a Christian denomination. That's showing that I understand that Christianity is what I need to include in this answer, is that artificial contraception should not be used. This is because the church teaches that every sexual act should include the possibility of creating new life. You'll notice I've put many Roman Catholics because not all agree, and I've put the church teaches because what the church teaches may or may not be what people actually do in their lives. So it's a good little hack to use phrases like that to show that you understand that there's a little bit of nuance. Not everybody believes the same things. A contrasting belief comes from Islam, which teaches that married couples may use contraception to choose the size of their family and space out pregnancies, but it should not be used to prevent having children at all. That would be plenty. That's enough for that one. Let's look at the 5-mark question. So, not too different, but the main thing is the 5th mark is for a reference to scripture, sacred writings, or another source of religious beliefs and teachings in your answer. And the first thing I want to say before we get into this is you reference to scripture or sacred writings or religious beliefs, don't make it up. Don't just try and make up something that you think sounds good, because you won't get credited for it. Also, particularly if you're in the themes paper and you're going backwards and forwards between different religions, try not to mix up religions. Don't say something comes from the Quran if it actually comes from the Bible. So structure is the same. One belief is, and then some explanation. Another belief or another reason, should be belief there, is, and then you say, right. But then in one of your paragraphs, doesn't matter which one, you need a clear, specific reference to a holy book or another source of beliefs and teachings. So the Hadith, for instance, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, that isn't a holy book, but it's a source of religious beliefs and teachings. So you could use the Hadith. You could use, if you were in Christianity, you could obviously use the Bible. You could refer to something that had been put out by the Catholic Church, an encyclical of the Pope or something. There are lots of these examples in the textbook. So if you're using your textbook, if you're revising from that, there's lots of quotes obviously, but there's other bits and pieces you can use for this as well. And that's why they give you this in the textbook, so you can learn them for these questions. So here's my answer. If you're doing a 5-mark question well, you'll probably end up with one paragraph a bit longer than the other. So the reason my first paragraph's a little bit longer is because that's where I've got my reference to scripture. And you'll see it doesn't have to be word for word. So I've paraphrased there. It's the end of the first paragraph. So let me just see if I can highlight it for you or underline it. So it's this bit here. The Quran says that anyone who ignores the prophets will be cursed by Allah. So that's where I'm getting my 5th mark. I haven't got to get it word for word exactly as it is in the text. That's close enough, so that will do. A paraphrase is okay. If you can do it word for word perfect and put it in quote marks, great, but you don't have to do that. Okay. Let's move on, because I want to spend a little bit of time talking about 12-mark questions. There is a lot to do in a 12-mark question. Make sure that you read all the instructions. Make sure that you understand all the things that need to go in. And it is quite a lot. Now, I think it's a good idea to set this out as 3 paragraphs. But that's not set in stone. AQA don't require that it's 3 paragraphs. I just think 3 paragraphs helps you get in everything that you need. So for this one, in paragraph 1, you could say why someone might agree with the statement. You back that up with reasons and examples and show that you understand Muslim ideas about the importance of the Shahada. And then evaluate this point of view. How good an argument do you think that is that you've just discussed? Paragraph 2, you flip it. You talk about why someone might disagree, exactly the same thing again, and evaluate it. Paragraph 3, this is conclusion, and this is going to be mostly evaluation. So overall, how true do you think the statement is? Why do you think that? Why do you not think that? How convincing do you find the arguments that you set out in the first 2 paragraphs? So let's have a look at some do's and don'ts. Do structure your answer in clear paragraphs. Don't just do a massive stream of writing. That's very difficult to follow. Do put a conclusion on which makes it clear what your overall evaluation is. So in this model, that would be paragraph 3, and it needs to be a proper paragraph, not just a sentence. Do remember that it's supposed to be an argument. So this isn't just you writing down what a bunch of different people think about something. There's got to be a line of argument. I think the mark scheme or the levels of response calls it logical chains of reasoning. That's quite important, but that is quite hard to do. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Don't just write down everything you know about the topic area. So this is a question about the Shahada. You don't need to spend a paragraph saying what the Shahada is. It's okay to write as if you know what it is. It will be clear anyway, if you do it properly. Don't feel that your answer has to be either yes, I'm fully in favour of the statement, or no, I totally disagree with the statement. It doesn't have to be as binary as that. It can be more nuanced. It might be that you do strongly agree with it or that you do strongly disagree with it, but you can be somewhere in the middle as long as you explain why. Be careful though, because what you don't want to do is just say, overall, having considered it, I think there's good points on either side and therefore I don't know, because that's just going to look like a bit of a cop-out. The other thing that quite often goes wrong with these is time. Don't run out of time, because remember, this is worth the most marks of any other question. A little tip, there's nothing to stop you in the exam doing these first. If you find that you struggle with timings, maybe get them out of the way first, get them done, and then spend a little bit less time doing the lower value questions. Just on timings for a second, I recommend that you save about 15 minutes to do your 12 marker if you can. Okay, so Shahada is the most important pillar of Islam. Here's my model answer. So I'm not going to read it out. Feel free to pause the video while you have a look at it. So you can see that I've got on the one hand, on the other hand, in conclusion. Those are good sentence starters, but you don't have to do it that way. That's just a nice formula that can work. What I want to highlight for you is where I'm actually evaluating. So let me just take the first paragraph. It could be argued that without this, there's no point to the rest of the 5 pillars because it's only through faith in God that they would mean anything. And then this is where I evaluate. So I say, I think this is a strong argument because pilgrimage, charity, fasting and prayers would only have meaning if there was a higher purpose to them. And this surely comes from belief in one God as described in the Shahada. So I'm commenting on what it is I've just said. This is how you get 12 out of 12, by doing that level of evaluation. And again, I've done it here on the other side. So I'm not agreeing so strongly here. I understand this argument, but I think it would be wrong to argue that these are more important than the Shahada because, and then I say why. And then in conclusion, it seems to me that the statement is not fully true. And then you can see my conclusion is about a third of my writing. So I say why I think that, and at the end, therefore I would argue that Shahada is extremely important, but so are the other pillars as well. So you can see I'm not just saying a bunch of stuff about the 5 pillars. I'm building an argument. It's fine to write in the first person. It's fine to say, I think, my view is, I would argue, as long as you do it in quite an academic sort of way. I know some subjects, some teachers recommend that you don't do that, but I think when you're evaluating, it's a good idea to, because then you're making it clear that you are evaluating. Also, I've checked with AQA and they say it's fine. So have a go at some. The best advice I can give you is to just practice loads and loads of questions, get some feedback from your teachers. You learn by doing. That's the best advice that I can give you, really. I hope that's been super helpful. I'm going to put more GCSE videos on very, very soon. Please like this if you've enjoyed it, if you found it useful. Subscribe to the channel, tell your friends. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.